You ever find yourself walking into a room that smells familiar, but off, like something you once loved but has been sitting stale for too long? That's what going back feels like. It tricks your brain. It plays on the deepest, oldest parts of your neurobiology, the parts wired for comfort, for safety, for patterns. But make no mistake, what is familiar is not always what is good for you. When you return to an old relationship, an old town, or an old job, you're not just revisiting a memory, you're reigniting a neural pathway that once defined who you were, not who you've become. The brain thrives on adaptation, not repetition. That's the science. You don't grow by stepping backwards into past versions of yourself. You grow by challenging the brain's tendency to conserve energy, to default to ease, and by forcing it to construct new circuits, ones built for resilience, vision, and forward momentum. Our nervous system doesn't distinguish well between good and bad comfort. It only recognizes familiarity. And if you're not careful, it will pull you like gravity back into the same toxic loop, disguised as home, disguised as love, disguised as stability. Your dopamine system, which is designed to respond to novelty and progress, flatlines in repetition. You stop evolving. You stop firing new patterns. You numb your capacity for excellence. People say, but what if it's different this time? Different isn't built on hope. Different is built on evidence. And if the place, the person, or the profession hasn't fundamentally restructured, neurologically, emotionally, behaviorally, then what you're chasing is a ghost. And ghosts don't change. They haunt. You're not meant to return to what broke you just because you learned how to survive it. You're meant to use that survival as data, hard-earned neurological data to inform your next steps. Not your back steps, because every time you return, you reinforce the idea that growth equals discomfort, and comfort equals stagnation, and that, my friend, is the opposite of how the brain is optimized to thrive. You want real progress? Step forward into uncertainty. Lean into the places your nervous system hasn't memorized yet. That's where neuroplasticity happens. That's where identity is redefined. That's where life actually begins. You ever walk into a place and feel like time didn't move? Like your body's in the present, but your brain's been hijacked and thrown back 5 years? That's not nostalgia, it's neurological inertia. Familiarity has a powerful grip on the brain. It's efficient. It doesn't require metabolic cost. It doesn't ask your prefrontal cortex to solve anything new. So your brain, if left unchecked, will default to the known because it feels safe. But safety is not the same as growth. In fact, those two states are often neurologically opposed. Here's the science when you're in a familiar environment. Say, an old job, a past relationship, or the town where you first learned to shrink yourself, your limbic system calms down. Your amygdala feels less threatened, but your dopamine system, it flatlines. Because it's not being challenged. It's not being asked to track progress. It's not being activated by novelty or risk. And that's when you start to feel stuck. You start to function, but you stop evolving. Familiarity activates the same neural pathways that once helped you survive, but they're outdated. They were designed for who you were, not who you're becoming. If you keep feeding those circuits, your brain doesn't build new ones, it just runs the old script more efficiently. That's not mastery, that's stagnation. And it's why going back, no matter how tempting, is almost always a betrayal of the version of you that's still under construction. Comfort is a trap dressed like a reward. It feels good in the short term because your nervous system interprets it as a signal that you're not under threat. But here's the paradox: the same neural mechanisms that tell you I'm safe here are the ones that start dulling your edge. Biologically, when your environment stops demanding adaptation, your brain reduces its output of neurochemicals tied to learning, drive, and focus: dopamine, acetylcholine, norepinephrine. You don't just get bored, you get neurologically soft. And that's the part most people don't see. They think, this feels familiar, it must be right. No, it just feels easier. But ease is not a reliable metric for alignment. Your brain is an efficiency machine. It loves repeatability because it burns fewer calories, but the path of least resistance rarely leads to growth. It just circles you back to a loop of automatic behaviors and low-resolution emotional states. So comfort might make you feel temporarily okay, but long-term, it steals from your potential. It robs you of the neurobiological conditions required for transformation. That's not comfort, that's sedation. And when you sedate your nervous system long enough, it forgets how to respond to challenge. Then the hard things feel impossible, not because they are, but because you've been living on neural autopilot, confusing quiet with peace and familiarity with fulfillment. The brain is a novelty-seeking machine. It doesn't evolve by staying in the same place. It evolves by engaging with new experiences, solving new problems, and adapting to environments that challenge it. That's how neuroplasticity works. The brain rewires itself when it's forced to move into the unknown. And it's not just the mental benefit. The dopamine system thrives in these conditions. Dopamine isn't just the pleasure chemical, it's the learning chemical. It signals progress. It's what keeps us moving forward, motivates us to take that first step into something unfamiliar, because it promises that on the other side of discomfort is reward. Now think about how we experience dopamine in the familiar. You don't get that same surge from returning to the things you've already conquered. Your brain, when it's not being pushed, defaults to a baseline, a steady state of low-level engagement. It's not wired to celebrate repeating old patterns. It's wired to celebrate breaking them. When you're stuck in something known, your brain's dopamine response weakens, leaving you in a cycle of low motivation and energy. But the moment you step into something that challenges you, something that forces your brain to adapt, it's like flipping a switch. The dopamine kicks in. It sharpens your focus, increases your drive, and tells your brain, this is worth your effort. This is why people who are constantly in the same environment, doing the same thing day in and day out, often feel like they're running on fumes. It's not that they don't have potential, they're just not activating the brain's growth circuits because they're not introducing enough novelty into their lives. And until they do, they're never going to feel the fire that drives real sustainable progress. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and form new connections, isn't something that just happens in a comfortable, predictable environment. It's sparked by the unfamiliar, by the things that challenge you in ways you haven't been challenged before. When you're constantly doing the same thing, going to the same place, interacting with the same people, your brain isn't forced to adapt. It's running the same neural pathways over and over again. It's like running on a treadmill. Your body's moving, but you're not actually getting anywhere. When you expose your brain to new experiences, new environments, or new relationships, it has to fire new neurons. It has to make new connections. And when those new connections form, the brain literally rewires itself. It becomes more resilient, more capable of handling the next challenge. But none of that happens when you keep returning to the same old loop. That's where the magic of neuroplasticity is lost. It only happens when you push your brain out of its comfort zone. Think about it this way. When you learn a new skill, whether it's a language, a sport, or a new job, you're forcing your brain to restructure itself. It's building new circuits, new ways of thinking, new ways of responding to stress, to novelty. You're creating new neural pathways that didn't exist before. But when you go back to something you've already mastered, or something that no longer serves you, your brain doesn't have to work that hard. The same pathways get activated, the same old patterns reemerge, and you stagnate. You don't grow. So if you want real change, if you want to tap into your brain's incredible capacity for growth, you've got to step into the unknown. You've got to create new experiences that force your brain to adapt, to make new connections, to build new networks. Otherwise, you're just reinforcing the same old wiring. And that's the opposite of neuroplasticity. It's neurostagnation. When you go back to something that once hurt you, something that once limited you, your brain doesn't just revisit those memories, it reactivates them. You might think you're stepping into a fresh start, but the truth is, you're just walking back into a neural pattern that was once hardwired, and those patterns don't forget. They carry emotional baggage. They carry past frustrations, failures, and fears. Your brain doesn't make a distinction between now and then. It just sees familiar neural circuitry being triggered again. Going back reinforces that old version of yourself, the one who made decisions based on fear, based on limiting beliefs, or based on comfort. It doesn't offer you the opportunity to rewrite the script. It forces you to live out the same story you've already lived, with the same emotional highs and lows. But this isn't a reset button. It's a loop, a repetitive cycle that traps you in the past, instead of allowing you to evolve into the future. Here's the danger in that. Your brain is constantly adapting. It's trying to make sense of your environment, trying to fit you into a place where you can thrive. But if you keep going back to the same toxic environment, or the same emotionally draining relationship, or the same job that drained you, your brain doesn't get to learn new patterns. It just reverts to the old ones. And the more you revisit those old places, the more those neural circuits become ingrained. You end up strengthening pathways that reinforce the belief that this is all you're capable of. That's not progress, that's regression. So each time you go back, you're not just returning to a place, a person, or a job. You're reinforcing a part of yourself that's stuck in time. You're reactivating a part of your neurobiology that was already holding you back. You're not opening a new chapter. You're stuck reading the same old page. The only way to break that cycle is to stop going back. Stop giving the past that kind of power over your present. This idea that this time it'll be different is one of the most seductive illusions our brains can create, and it's dangerous. You see, our brains are wired for hope. They're wired to believe that if we just tweak one small thing, if we just change this one detail, then the whole situation will be different. The job will be different. The relationship will be different. The town will be different. But that belief is often based on wishful thinking, not on evidence. It's driven by the emotional brain, not the rational one. And here's where it gets tricky. Your brain's reward system is directly tied to anticipation. You start to believe that going back will fix the issues. It might even give you a temporary rush, a sense of optimism, that this time you'll get what you need from the situation. But what you're doing is gambling on the same faulty variables that let you down in the first place. And that's not hope, it's misdirection. Think about it. How many times have you returned to a toxic relationship, a stagnant job, or a town that never really supported you, thinking that the outcome would be different this time around? Maybe you even tell yourself, I'm different now, I've grown. But the environment hasn't changed. The people haven't changed. The fundamental dynamics haven't changed. And that's not growth, it's a trap. Your brain doesn't like uncertainty, and it doesn't like to confront uncomfortable truths. So it creates these narratives of hope and possibility to shield you from facing the reality that nothing has fundamentally changed. And without real change, you'll fall into the same old patterns, the same arguments, the same frustrations, the same sense of dissatisfaction. Hope alone doesn't change outcomes. Action does. Real tangible evidence of change. Until the circumstances have actually transformed, the chances of a different result are slim. And yet you keep returning. You hope, but you don't have the evidence to back it up. The truth is, change requires more than wishful thinking. It demands data. It demands a shift in the environment, in the people you engage with, and most importantly, in how you interact with the world. Without that data, you're just repeating the same mistakes, under the illusion that it'll somehow be different. But the brain is more rational than that. It knows patterns. It knows what works and what doesn't. And until you change the variables, you're just replaying the same old script. The emotional brain, the limbic system, is incredibly powerful. It doesn't deal in logic or reason. It deals in feelings, in memories, in associations. And when you've been in a relationship or a job or a place that has a strong emotional imprint on you, your brain becomes deeply attached to the feelings of that environment, even when those feelings are negative. It's a paradox because the emotional brain doesn't always work in your best interest. It works to keep you comfortable, even if that comfort means staying in situations that drain you or hold you back. Here's the thing about emotional attachment. It's hardwired to preserve. It doesn't care whether the situation is healthy, whether it's evolving, whether it's pushing you toward your potential. It just wants to keep things the way they were because that's what's familiar. And when you go back to these old places, you're not necessarily going back to the best version of yourself. You're going back to the version of you that was shaped by those same emotional attachments, the version that felt comfortable in the toxic dynamics, in the unfulfilling routines. It's a neural shortcut, but a dangerous one. The emotional brain doesn't make logical distinctions about whether a relationship has ended, or a job is draining, or a town has nothing left to offer you. All it knows is that it feels familiar. It's like an emotional gravitational pull. It lures you back in, convincing you that the feelings you experienced in that place, with those people, are a source of comfort, even if they're ultimately the very things holding you back. And that's where you have to separate yourself from the emotional brain. It's not that those emotions are invalid, it's that they're not always accurate. They're based on past experiences, and they don't account for the growth you've gone through since then. They don't account for the new challenges you've overcome, or the new parts of yourself that are asking to be expressed. But when you return to the same toxic place, the same unhealthy relationship, the same draining job, you're letting your emotional brain make decisions for you, rather than your evolved rational self. You're allowing feelings from the past to dictate the direction of your future, and in doing so you reinforce the very patterns that kept you stuck in the first place. Progress, real progress, doesn't come without a cost. It's not free. It doesn't just fall into your lap because you wish for it. No, progress demands energy, discomfort, and sometimes even pain. The brain's default is to conserve energy. It's wired to minimize effort and maximize efficiency. So when you're in a place that feels familiar, that feels safe, your brain doesn't have to work that hard. It doesn't need to be creative. It doesn't need to be adaptive. It just runs on autopilot. And in that space, you're not growing. You're just maintaining. True growth, the kind that transforms you, requires that you break free from that autopilot mode. It requires you to step out of comfort zones, to push your brain to its limits, to stimulate those neural circuits that have been lying dormant, and that doesn't feel good. It feels uncomfortable. It's challenging. It asks you to invest energy into new things, things that your brain hasn't mapped out yet, things that require effort and decision-making, things that aren't as easy as what you've done before. When you're stuck in a comfortable routine, whether it's an old relationship or a job that's no longer fulfilling, you're not activating your brain's capacity for adaptation. You're not forcing it to innovate or rewire itself. You're just running the same neural circuits over and over again. But when you take that step into the unknown, when you push yourself into uncertainty, that's when the brain begins to engage. It's when the challenge is big enough that your brain can no longer rely on old shortcuts. It has to expend energy to navigate the unfamiliar. And that's where the power lies. The brain is literally designed to adapt when pushed. But without that investment, without that discomfort, the brain stays in a state of low effort, low growth. It stays stuck. That's why staying in the same place, returning to the same people or environments, feels so much easier. It doesn't require you to engage. But that's the trap, because if you're not engaging, you're not evolving, and if you're not evolving, you're not moving forward. So you've got to invest the energy to push past the comfort, even when it feels like you're burning out. It's in that tension, in that discomfort, where the real transformation occurs. And it's the only way to get to the version of yourself that can achieve what you've only dreamed of. Your identity is not a static thing. It's not a fixed, unchanging entity that just sits there and waits for life to happen around it. Your identity is fluid, dynamic, and constantly shaped by your environment, your decisions, and crucially the challenges you face. The version of yourself that exists today is the product of the experiences you've had, the risks you've taken, and the discomforts you've endured. Every challenge you've faced, every time you've stepped into uncertainty, your brain has adapted and redefined who you are. But when you return to the old familiar places, you're pulling yourself back into a version of yourself that was shaped by past circumstances, not present capabilities. You can't redefine who you are if you're still clinging to who you used to be. If you keep going back to the people, the jobs, or the situations that once limited you, you're not stepping into the future, you're recreating the past. And your brain, your neurobiology, thrives on the new. It thrives on the next challenge, the next opportunity to stretch, to adapt, to grow. That's how you truly discover what you're capable of. The moment you step into the unknown, the moment you challenge yourself beyond the limits of what's familiar, your identity is up for grabs. Your brain has to redefine itself to meet the demands of that new environment. But the moment you return to something old, something safe, the identity you've been trying to outgrow reasserts itself. The old self, the one defined by outdated patterns and limiting beliefs, takes over. You start to behave as that person again, out of habit, out of the comfort of the familiar. You stop expanding, you stop evolving. Your brain reverts to what it knows because it's easier, but easier doesn't make you stronger. Easier doesn't make you more resilient. Easier doesn't make you more capable. So if you want to step into the person you're capable of becoming, if you want to tap into your true potential, you have to leave behind the old version of yourself. You have to let go of the places, the people, the jobs that kept you small, and embrace the uncertainty of who you could be. Because the only way to redefine your identity is to live it, through the discomfort, through the new experiences, through the challenges that force your brain to evolve and build new neural pathways. And in that process you'll discover just how much more you can be. Every time you go back to something familiar, you're not just repeating a past mistake, you're reinforcing a cycle, a loop that doesn't serve your growth. This cycle isn't just emotional or mental, it's neurological. It's easy to fool yourself into thinking you'll get a different result by returning to the same place, the same job, or the same person, but the truth is, you're just running the same pattern, over and over again. The brain, once it's locked into a particular pathway, will keep running that track unless something disrupts it. And that disruption can't come from the past. It has to come from the future. When you keep returning, you're essentially telling your brain, this is where I belong. This is what I deserve. This is the environment that defines me. But what you deserve is not defined by where you've been. It's defined by where you're willing to go. The brain is constantly updating itself, constantly adapting to new experiences. And every time you return to something that holds you back, you're essentially telling your brain to stop updating. You're locking yourself in place, closing the door to the possibility of growth, and reinforcing the idea that change isn't possible for you. The only way to break that cycle is to stop going back. You have to interrupt that pattern. You have to stop reinforcing the neural pathways that keep you stuck in a loop of repetition. It's not enough to just think, I don't want to go back. You have to create new experiences, new challenges, new environments that demand more from you, that force you to evolve. The brain can't just hold on to the past. It has to move forward to thrive. And when you create space for something new, something unknown, you disrupt that old pattern. You break the cycle. Each time you return to the old, you're reinforcing the belief that you have no power over your future. But when you break that cycle, you're telling your brain, I am the one who decides where I go. I am the one who shapes my path. And that's the only way to create lasting change. You have to disrupt the old loops, the old behaviors, the old patterns, and step into a new version of yourself. Only then can you truly move forward and embrace what's waiting for you on the other side of discomfort.